slower, controlled pace games, and now he has a chance to put himself one map win away from securing the crown for the 2014 Battleground circuit. In the top right, representing Red Bull himself, it is none other than Bomber.
Over here, the left top side of merry-go-round, the new kid on the block. He's been on an absolute tear lately. Give it up for Cure.
You know, Kev, it just feels so silly when I think about that last game. Cure did not really make any mistakes except for overreacting to the cloakless Banshee. The three missile turrets didn't end up being useful, but aside from that, everything looked pretty damn good. His third was up really fast, he had good upgrade timing, he had a decent amount of tanks and Marines. Just Bomber is that guy that just does things that don't seem to make sense, but end up working brilliantly anyway.
I mean, of course, Bomber saves himself some resources by not dropping a second engineer bay, by not investing in those upgrades, and by not dropping an armory, and that will eventually translate into a few more Marines. He also had those reactors up quite a bit quicker than Cure had, so he was able to produce more Marines, and Cure was researching both Stim and Combat Shield at the same time, which forced him, of course, to have 2 tech labs on those Rexes, and I guess that will explain the 20 or so Marine advantage that Bomber had.
That's a really good point. I still think when you're dealing with numbers of Marines that high, the combat shield's definitely better than having a couple of extra Marines because you want to be able to stim once without being. Like the thing is, if you stim and you don't have combat shields, you drop straight to 35 hit points, which is enough for a tank to kill you in a single shot. So your Marines will be killed twice as fast, basically, by those siege tanks. And it's a hard compromising position to be in, but Bomber is the kind of guy that puts you in those spots.
But it's safe to say that Cure maybe shouldn't have been in that position though, because he was not the one opening up with a Banshee, so I don't really understand why his upgrades would have been later in the first place. Of course, he did get quicker siege tanks and stuff. Anyways, Cure opened up with a gas this map, as you guys could see, and he dropped a very, very quick refinery. It was 3 minutes sharp. Bomber's refinery is going to be a little bit later, but will give him access to the same amount of units. We do see the second refinery going down for Cure, so he could be going back to those Cloaked Banshees. They did pretty well for themselves on Nimbus, despite him not winning the game. It was definitely not because of what the Cloaked Banshees achieved.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, Cloaked Banshees have kind of been agreed, I'd say, across the board in Terran vs. Terran to never be a bad choice, because they always force out pretty close to some form of equal or opposite reaction. You kind of have to get an engineering bay and turrets. If you open Raven, you leave yourself vulnerable to other fast, aggressive plays. But in this instance, with both players getting that quick factory, it's not as big of a deal. Bomber's going to be slightly behind in this regard, but with the tech lab here, I think we saw this against Polt, just going for a somewhat delayed Raven and expanding behind it.
Yeah, I'm kind of feeling the same way, Nate. I think it's going to be a Raven into a Viking, which should allow him not to take too much damage from those Banshees. But we thought the same thing on Nimbus, and back then Cure was still able to kill 12 or so SCVs.
Yeah, I like this tweet. The one is like, can't cure Bomber because he's too sick.
He is kind of a sick puppy, let's be honest.
Yeah, big thanks to all of you that have been tweeting with hashtag Battlegrounds this whole tournament. You guys have given us some good comedic relief.
Yeah, and they've been very active as well. It's been non-stop fresh tweets over the last few days, and a lot of funny tweets as well.
Yeah, everybody that's participated has been pretty cool, I'd say, so far. But
Bomber does the thing again where he puts the racks in the factory on top of this ramp, so it makes it very hard for anything to enter.
Yep, it makes it very difficult. You're not really going to be able to squeeze Hellions in if you're one of those guys. But here comes that Banshee. Cloak is almost done. We said it, Roddy. Delayed Raven, expand. This just gives an economic advantage to Bomber, and when you're up 2-0, you know, you want to put yourself in that match point. Then you can maybe take a risk if you're up 3-0, but you just want to lock that down, because Bomber did come very close to throwing away that series he had a lead against Polt with.
Yeah, it's never over when you play against players that are as good as Polt or Cure. You can be up 3-0, and it wouldn't be the first time in SC2 history that you will still end up losing the finals. Funny that we mentioned that, because of course Innovation is going to be the opponent of Cure.
I'm sure he's watching all these games.
I think Innovation is probably tuning in. Hi, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Something in.
Might actually tweet at us. Maybe Innovations to send a few tweets. I'm really enjoying these games, Kappa. Please make it go all 7. Cloaked Banshee didn't really achieve a whole lot over there. Got a couple of shots up, picked up 1 SCV, I believe. But of course, with the Raven, it's very hard for a Cloak Banshee to be extremely effective. It's always a good feeling, I think, as a Terran player, Nate, when you open up with your Raven and you see a Cloak Banshee fly into your base and you have your Marines in the right position.
Yeah, you know, there are other aggressive builds that a Raven has trouble with on a map like this. If Hellions run in and that auto turret, it's powerful, but it doesn't move, so you can get caught off guard. But delaying that attack is always quite nice, because then you get the Viking follow-up, and that really locks down your defense. Most Terrans follow up with the siege tanks, but in this situation, both players will expand pretty heavily. But what's really important to note is that the infrastructure is up much faster for Cure this game because Bomber got that third command center.
You know, and what is so typical Bomber, he spots that this is a Cloak Banshee opening, and he realized, I think, like, hey, on Nimbus, I still took a little bit too much damage. There's a Widow Mine and a missile turret here, but just to show how careful Bomber is with spending any resources, he only drops one missile turret because he has a Raven as well. So he knows, if I just keep my Raven and my Vikings in my natural, I only need one additional turret, because the Raven obviously can be at 2 places at once, but I think that is just so Bomber to only spend 75 all. You could be like, you know, it's Cloak Banshees, I should just drop 2 missile turrets to be safe. No, not Bomber. Right now he can spend those 75 minerals somewhere else, and he's doing it.
You know, if that's the difference between getting your supply depot a little bit earlier so that you hit your next production cycle, getting your add-on a couple seconds earlier so you can get a couple Marine advantage, those are the very seemingly small things that give players like Bomber a huge advantage in matchups like this. And, you know, being able to just somehow get dozens more Marines than his opponent when it doesn't really seem like the game gave him an advantage.
Cure is moving across the map now with a couple of his tanks, and well, this Banshee is actually being annoying. Might be able to pick up 1 or 2 SCVs here, but Cure is taking absolute map control. Of course, Bomber went up to 3 bases already. He doesn't have it on location yet, but he's working off 3 command centers, so that was an investment. If we take a look at the army supply right now, we can see that Cure has a little more to work with. 43 against 31. That is, of course, because Bomber is investing in that command center. But Cure also, he has to make something happen with this push, and he's going to have to be very methodical about it, because if this goes wrong, Nate, Bomber is going to find himself in an absolutely dream scenario.
The posture that Bomber is in is absolutely fantastic.
There are 2 tanks. He throws down a scan.
There's a tank in Bomber's main. He has the Widow Mine. He has Vikings. He has
Seeker
Marines.
missiles. Oh my god, I'm not sure about this one, Cure.
He's like, get out of my base. I did not invite you. Now, the tanks will still land, but without the Marines, you can't really push forward, and you lose any vision advantage.
This is not the damage that he was looking for. There is a Banshee. No, actually.
That guy's arm went really high up.
Oh man, Cure is in trouble, Nate. This really had to do way more damage. Bomber is going to be able to clean this up without losing all too many resources. And Cure is still only working off 2 command centers.
That's right.
And you know, just now, like a solid 2-3 minutes later, that's when Bomber added that second missile turret in his natural, which was so important because there was still a Cloak Banshee there. That if now he didn't have the Raven anymore because he needed the Raven to defend, it's all these small things. But Bomber, he's actually playing very, very beautiful TVT over here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's bad to get the second turret. It's just if you can delay it, well, then you're spending money in a time where you're just making more, so it's not as big of an investment to defend your natural. Now, with the extra barracks being added on, actually a couple Marines pretty sloppy getting picked off here by Cure, and the 3rd command center gets pushed back. Bomber's not going to take that 3rd yet.
Okay.
Cure is committing himself to basically what is essentially a 2-base all-in.
I think it's very important that Bomber didn't commit to taking that base yet, because it would have almost been impossible for him to cover everything. Either he would lose too many units in his main base and he would lose the 3rd base, or he would not protect his main base and then a big Doom drop could really mess him over. I think it's very smart. Of course, you know, Bomber doesn't really know as he picks up that Banshee as well. Bomber doesn't exactly know if Cure is on 3 bases or not, but he's probably wondering, he's like, hey, I feel like I'm doing pretty good here. I had an economical build, and you just keep attacking me.
Cure needs to be careful. He's very close to just being bum rushed down that ramp. I think Bomber's realizing, he's like, I have a pretty big army. My economy is really starting to pay off at this point.
And his +1 armor on the Marines is also a solid 30 seconds ahead of the +1 from Cure. It's going to finish up real soon. Cure is still just running around with that army, almost like a chicken without its head. It seems like he doesn't really know what he wants to do, but he has to do something soon, Nate, because Bomber, every second that goes by now, I feel is a really good second for him.
Yeah, there's not a lot of opportunities for Cure, but at this stage in the game, you can't be afraid to make some big decisions because you're just behind, period. There's nothing There's no advantage in this game anymore since Bomber's finished enough barracks to have an equal amount of production to him.
He has 2 more medevacs. That's the only advantage
This
that Tier
position
has.
is really good, though. He's going to try to lock Bomber out of his natural. Bomber doesn't let it take. Drops the auto turret, soaks up the first wave of tank fire, and it's going pretty damn nicely for him. He's cleaned up all the Marines of
Bomber.
Pure, and the
Oh my God,
reinforcements
so many
stream down the ramp.
reinforcements.
Bomber sweeps house once again.
Bomber is a sick puppy. Again, he takes a 30 supply lead in game number 3. This is ridiculous. He's playing TVT against a Terran that's currently in the GSL Codas semi-finals, but Bomber is just taking absolute control of this series. Of course, you know, it can still go wrong if your tanks are on siege, if your opponent has a massive engagement, then maybe this can go into Cure's way, but a 30 supply advantage in Bomber's hands, Nate, I know what I would put my money on.
When you're a 2-base Terran about to be contained and pressed in by a 3-base Terran, you know some mistakes were made. And this is it, the last attack. He's going to try to overwhelm this army. You know what, Kev? You said it perfectly.